In 1866, the U.S. merchant vessel General Sherman sailed into Korean waters with the goal of lifting Korea from its isolationist state and to open up the peninsula to trade with the United States. However, the Koreans mistakenly believed the ship to be part of a French warship on a punitive expedition which would actually come a few months later. Anyway, the General Sherman would be informed that if they came ashore, they would then be executed. The General Sherman then sent a small boat and took a Korean official hostage, and as negotiations were ongoing, civilian onlookers gathered around the General Sherman, attacking the merchant ship in anger. The General Sherman responded by firing its cannon against the civilians on shore. The Koreans then dispatched troops and an improvised warship to destroy the General Sherman, but these efforts were repulsed. Eventually, waves of fire ships set the merchant ship on fire. The crew of the General Sherman jumped off the ship and were killed by the enraged civilians on shore. The Korean officials did not inform the United States government of the incident and evaded inquiries from American officials. 5 years later, in 1871, the United States dispatched a military expedition to Korea, in part to ascertain the fate of the General Sherman, and the American expedition consisted of about 650 men, with more than 500 sailors and 100 Marines, as well as 5 warships led by Rear Admiral John Rodgers. On the other side, the Korean forces, known as Tiger Hunters, were led by General Eo Jae-yuan, who consisted of 800 men, 40 artillery pieces, 6 forts, and 4 shore batteries. However, despite the strength of the Korean forces, the Americans would land safely on the Korean peninsula, and when they inquired to the Korean population about the General Sherman incident, the Koreans were initially reluctant to discuss the topic and avoided having to pay recompense. The Americans consequently then let the Koreans know that their fleet would be exploring the area and that they meant no harm. This gesture was, however, immediately misinterpreted, as Korean policy at the time had prohibited any foreign ships from sailing on the Han River, which led directly to the capital city of Hanyang, which is modern-day Seoul. Therefore, the Joseon government rejected the U.S. request. The Americans sailed anyway, but on June 1st, the Korean fortresses fired on the U.S. fleet as it sailed up the Ganghwa Straits, which led to the Han River. The U.S. forces were not badly damaged due to poor aim, but the United States demanded an apology within 10 days. There was no response, so Rodgers decided on a punitive assault on the fortresses. The Battle of Ganghwa began on June 10th, where the American squadrons arrived off Point du Conde and began bombarding the fort there. The shore party was landed by boats, which immediately launched an attack on the fort, which was taken without any serious resistance. Next, the Americans proceeded north a short distance where they captured Fort Monocacy, skirmishing with bodies of Korean troops along the way. After the fall of the fort, the Americans rested for the night and became the first Western military forces to camp on Korean soil. On the next day, the main engagement would occur, where the 5 warships began bombarding the 4 remaining forts while the shore party attacked from the land. About 300 Koreans, armed with matchlock rifles, swords, and clubs, held Fort Maki, which was the heart of the Korean defenses. The cannons of the USS Monocacy blasted the Korean citadel walls, and the Americans then charged up the ramparts. The Koreans were running low on ammunition and began throwing rocks and slinging their swords, fatally injuring Lieutenant Hugh McKee, who was stabbed by a spear as he held the charge. One by one, the Americans would climb over the fort walls and achieve a victory. Fierce close-quarters combat then ensued, but only lasted around 15 minutes until the fort was secure. In the end, 243 Koreans were counted dead by the Americans. However, the number was 350 according to Korean sources. 20 Koreans were captured and a few were wounded. Over 40 cannons ranging from 2 to 24 pounders were also taken, and within the next few days the forts were all dismantled, with the exception of Fort Palos. On the other side of the Ganghwa Straits, Corporal Charles Brown captured a large Sujigai and received the Medal of Honor for doing so. Another Medal of Honor recipient from the battle was Carpenter Cyrus Hayden, who under heavy fire had planted the American flag on top of the Korean fort. Also, Private James Doherty personally shot and killed the Korean commander, being General Eo Jae-yuan, and he and 6 others were awarded the Medal of Honor that day. Only 3 Americans were killed and 10 were wounded. The USS Monocacy was grounded on the rocks of Fort McKee during the battle, but she was refloated and sustained only light damages. Did you know about the 1871 American expedition to Korea before this video? What other aspects of East Asian military history would you like for me to cover? Write in the comments, and thank you for watching.